If I understand correctly, dear participants, now we are moving to our next part. It's not a lecture, it's going to be a round table. We will have a discussion. We didn't have a chance to say hello, so good morning. I wish I could participate in this round table, but I don't understand in this topic anything. I'm a doctor on my background. Maybe I get my second education and then I will be able to take part in this round table. Our operators, they really like your airs, your sessions. I didn't pay them for that 500 rubles. It's just peanuts. Okay, dear friends, please be relaxed. Maybe we will have a quite an informal discussion about complicated things. We will discuss high financial technologies. Thanks a lot to you. Hello, my name is Nadezhda Grosheva. I'm the moderator from Business FM, and I'm moderating FinTech program on RBC channel. Today we will discuss financial technologies, surprisingly enough, on Finopolis, where we are discussing financial technologies for the second day already. Let me introduce to you our guest, Tatyana Zharkova, Managing Director of FinTech Association, President of Expert Council on Evaluation of Innovation, Financial Services and Technologies, established on the initiative of the Bank of Russia. Please, your applause. Dmitry Olyunin, First Deputy CEO of VTB Bank Board, Tatyana Ushkova, Board Chairman, Absolut Bank, Mikhail Fedotov, Director of Subsidiary Funds RVK, and Pavel Kreschishin, CEO of Tada.team Corporate Messenger. Just in the beginning, let us discuss the fresh trends in FinTech area. We heard a lot about financial technologies in these days. Now we can discuss what happens in the security systems of banks. It is very relevant for us. Please, just in a few words, tell us what was the most interesting for you here, what FinTech technologies, well, and what trends are the most relevant now? Okay, trends. What are the most relevant trends here? Let me make a short introduction how we see the development of financial market and fintech market. The global amount of the market is around $55 billion, and from the last 2 years it has doubled. We see significant growth in China, and the investments in fintech are going very actively. If we speak about the Russian experience, for the last 5 years we have done a huge leap forward, and there is a rating of global innovations of UN where Russia reached position 49, and previously we were at the 69th position. Going a little bit down to the banking level, bank sector, and we can be proud of it, and all participants can be proud of it. Our banking sector is leader of innovations compared to European countries. Our banking sector has much more innovations than in Europe, and our segment plays the leading role in the development of the digital economy. A lot of infrastructural projects like digital identification, faster payments, and all things related to cybersecurity, they are led by banks, and it allows to create special infrastructure and conditions to develop the digital economy.
We already discussed all the technologies, and I'm not going to go into details because blockchain, open API, you name it, all of it exists, all of it is here. Exhibition is here, you can see it. And actually, I can say that technology is very important. And yesterday I was part of the insurance section, and we've come to understand that technologies matter, and our ideas, how should we use these technologies. That's also very important. It'll simplify our lives, make it more comfortable. And as for NAFI's statistics, most of the population thinks that innovations help solve a lot of problems and issues, and about 60% of population of the world think that innovations make life easier. And I think we have three trends today, and these trends from the standpoint of development and technology that we need to take into account. Number one, that's client-centric strategy. And we've been discussing this for a number of years already, but today we've taken it to a different level, and we can see that big data may be used differently, real-time data may be used differently, and we can customize our offers, and the client is waiting for it. Number two, it's contextualization. And Mr. Verkhoshinsky yesterday, he said that digitalization is linked to this. But I think that we're not living online only. We're alive, we move around, so context matters. Financial service, thanks to technologies, becomes invisible. For example, clients used to want something cheap and quick, but now, plus invisible, that's something new. But actually, this is very important for services. And trend number three, and I think we can see it even here, is competition. It's about market development and development of players, and it's possible only when competitors start working together, when we see collaboration between industries, cross-industry collaboration and cooperation. And we see different goals, and we see different mottos, but we see telecoms and technological companies. It means we can only move forward if we work together, if we cooperate. So it's important to talk about technologies that change our lives. They are developing, so we need to embed them in our lives. Many bank apps give us opportunity to take credits and, for example, and loans. And, for example, if money arrives at the account, the bank already knows, and you push a button and you get the money. But behind this, we have very serious technology, but we don't tend to notice this. We don't know how fast the information is processed, data is processed. These transfers are happening very quickly. Counterparties can transfer money very quickly. But what do banks think about financial technologies that they're prepared to invest into? What companies are we talking about that banks are prepared to invest into? And what about the future? Dmitry? Good morning. Thank you for your question. Well, no doubt, I agree with what has just been said, and technology has changed and transformed our lives, and clients expect bank services to be very simple, easy, and be part of their lives. And it's very comfortable for them. And industry is faced with a number of challenges. How to communicate with clients, and those banks who want to be and stay leaders and don't become white labels, not just provide some product, but they want to be in direct contact with clients. And as VTB group of companies, we don't want to be outsiders, but we know that it's a long way. We can do this alone. We have all the means and tools, but probably it's much more complex and it'll take much more time. So if we work together with different companies from different spheres, that'll be much easier, and the path is going to be shorter. But we need to focus on a number of components, elements of our ecosystem. There are plenty of elements that we need to focus on, but for us, digitalization and direct contact with the client is also a way of expanding our database. At the moment, it's 12 million individuals and 500,000 legal entities. But that's not the limit, that's not the end. We want to cover more clients, so we want to expand our client database. That's why we're looking at the companies and solutions that can help us achieve that and increase the number of clients. Speaking about our choices that we're making, we have about 30 ideas and initiatives under development. Some of they come, some of they go, and we try to select companies that are of interest to us. There are some cases that we are developing on separate platforms. For example, housing, we've launched this May. Vyacheslav Dusolev is here today with us. He's in charge of this. We've invested in Unicorn 24. They are leaders in loans, and we're going to develop marketplace with their help. So it's not going to be loans only, but it's going to be much more banking services. We have acquired the first operator of fiscal data. They have about 15% share on the market. I can go on, but we started working in this more actively now. So it's now went beyond traditional strategy. Direct Investment Fund was founded this year. We are about to launch 4 more projects, and hopefully by the end of the year there'll be 2 more. We intend to implement 10 more projects next year, but we're not after the quantity. But at the same time, we want to create, or we want to acquire companies that can actually help us see the big picture. We want to expand our database of our clients, but at the same time, we want to deliver banking products to our clients. So access to new clients, simplicity, and banking products to our clients. Thank you. Okay, but such investments, how long does it take to get them back? For a group of companies, well, that's not much, but we intend to expand. We want to increase the share. But actually, we want to avoid cross-sales, and we see that profit will come from conversion. So non-banking services or non-banking clients will turn into bank clients. If there's no potential for payback, we don't go there. But if there is, then we implement such projects. So there are several sources of income. We intend to see 0% in the next 2 years and payback in the next 5 years. There are different projects. Some of them take longer time, but for us the target is 3 years and 5 years for investments. Okay, thank you, Dmitry. Tatyana, What does Absolut Bank think about investments? Well, thank you very much for this session. I'm really happy that not only Sberbank but VTB has an ambitious goal to build an ecosystem. So there's competition. We're in top 30, so we did have a chance to build the ecosystem. So we split all FinTechs into two groups. So we work with FinTechs who work in our niches, and they are working with clients who deal with banking systems. Example, yes, two niches that we have, and I think they're leaders. That's real estate niche and 44 and 204 law. That's state contract. 2.5 years ago, we decided to focus on this, and we had a number of questions. Do we fund this FinTech? Do we do this in-house, or should we look for a solution on the market? We had a lengthy discussion, and we've come to understand that we want something from outside. And here you can see Balance platform. And what we saw was a really good solution. 6 months required for the launch, and it wasn't possible in-house, not internally, but it was possible thanks to the options that we found. For shareholders and for us, it's very important to understand what's the impact or how FinTech can influence the situation. You know, companies from Israel, for example, do the following. They have a list of potential FinTechs, for example, from Russia, and they offer to answer 3 questions. For example, I know the company, I know what it does, I don't know the company, I don't know what it does, I don't know the company, and I don't know what it does. So, but maybe not everyone is aware of this, but actually 78% are in group 3. They don't know the company, they don't know what they do. Those are financial FinTechs. And FinTech is a really important topic. And do shareholders support this? And I'm sure you saw this in different companies, but we have succeeded. We had a competitive advantage. Everything was quickly approved. We had user-friendly app, and after a week, when I started talking to partners, they said, "Thank you very much for preparing all the documents in 20 minutes." So the competitive advantage wasn't quick approval, but credit documentation after approval. And I know all about it. I know how mortgage works in 10 banks, for example. I know how pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages. But I think that preparation of this documentation is almost, it's not digitalized, not in a single company. So for us, it was like a gift. We managed to do this. But real estate agencies and many others had no idea that it's possible to do something like that. They thought that preparation of such documentation takes a lot of time. They didn't know that SLA can be prepared that fast. So we feel the pain of our clients, and all our efforts were targeted at this. And actually, I think that Uber showed us how technology can transform the market completely. So that's what I'm talking about. It's not about statements and making statements. It's about clients' pain. Because digital factoring We intend to launch this in 2 weeks, completely 100% digital. But we thought there are no risks in guarantees. And actually, it was all pretty standard. It was 1 page, but lawyers from banks and corporations, no, actually, it's 3 pages, but they were trying to change the wording and do something else. And I said, why don't we go for a standard template? We need a template, and that's it. There'll be no more questions about this.
And this typical form would provide very good legal solution. And so the pain of the clients should not understand a lot in financial services. They should do their job, they should start their businesses, they should work in production. So I hope that FinTech and banks will help them in this regard. Thanks a lot. It is really true, such technologies change the approaches of banks to clients, and they make the life of clients easier. We can see it in our applications, we can see how market is changing, and there's a strong dependence on banks, of course. The top banks, they get a big benefit when they develop their financial technologies, and they move forward, and they move forward from the banks which do not have such opportunities. Is there an opportunity for smaller banks with small budget also make investments in FinTech? Good afternoon. Thanks a lot for this question. Investments in FinTech are open for everybody. Everybody has its opportunity. There are different development stages of technological companies. At earlier stages could be angels, at later stages foundations, and I'm really glad to hear that banks have become very sensitive and they adopt on their own their technologies for developing companies, and they can get both financial benefit and some strategic synergy. Now, we know a model which is not very well developed in Russia, so-called multi-funds. Several corporations, they invest in one fund under one management, and this model allows also smaller banks to fund and to take part in investments in developing FinTech projects. Thanks, Mikhail. Bank invests not only in obvious FinTech projects which allow to make faster remittance or fast, and the banks get smart terminals, small columns, and they bring the bank closer to the end user. What other methods are there to invest in non-obvious FinTech projects? Pavel, maybe you can explain. Good afternoon. As I've already introduced, my name is Pavel. Thanks a lot. Well, indeed, there are a lot of trends and ways of investment. Sberbank have been showing us for several years different ways, starting from corporate messenger, dialogue messenger, and I also represent the corporate messenger here. We are open to any proposals from different banks to make a competition in this area. But the main trend we discussed already, the trends of FinTech development, and previously, yes, earlier, we have very advanced technologies. They are all built inside banks, and last year and the year before, FinTech startups were not quite developed in the market. I know Unicom.24, and we cooperated with them in a previous project, and just a few years ago they had only small banks in their platforms with not interesting products, because banks were not quite ready to interact with third-party services like Unicom, and in Credit 24, with which we cooperated quite actively. And now we come to the fact, and this is wonderful, that banks started to look in the exterior domain. They stopped talking about only their in-house development. They start to look in more detail at the market, and the investments will not go only inside banks, and they're not gonna invest only in their own in-house development. They will look at external services. Sberbank was brilliant there, owing to its huge size and its commitment to break this wall of resistance and resilience to accept new services. It's wonderful that VTB starts to develop this system. More than 50% of our banking market is already investing in financial startups, and this is wonderful. And the main trend, what we see now and here now, if we take a look at stands here, there are 95% of 9 banks or big institutions. Talk Bank is is in the very end, close to coffee. And one of the claims or maybe difficulties, we should ask the regulator, why is it so difficult to organize interaction of FinTech or smaller startups with big companies, with bank ecosystems. In Britain, they have a notion as a FinTech startup sandbox. If you want to do something, you can come to the sandbox, you can do it, and you are not be liable for the central bank regulation, of course, to some certain limits. If you do this, if you prove it, you can grow faster. For instance, Stronsky project. As soon as this project can prove its importance and the competitiveness, then the regulator can change, can amend the legislation, and the project is going wider and is improving the customer experience, and this is wonderful. And when I was analyzing the memorandum of FinTech Association on connection to the joint authorization systems, where you can interact with tax service, with other parties. It was about auto-filling of banking questionnaires, and there is a system there. But to connect to this system now, within the described memorandum, you have to be a bank, and this system would be perfect for startups. And when, from the point of view of the regulator, additional opportunity windows will open to access the data which can help them to provide their services in a faster and best way, I think the booming development of the financial technology in Russia will go even faster, even stronger. Now we have not so many projects. The majority of projects which we used to have in 2015, 2016, they couldn't wait for coming of big players to the market. They disappeared and they went to other banks, and I hope now we are at the age of the new flourishing and new age of this trend. What are the peculiarities of FinTech investments? Let me add first about the memorandum and answer to the previous statement. We have the regulatory sandbox, that's first. It doesn't work in the same mode as in Europe, but you're welcome. You can come and try. And I'm also the chairman of the expert committee. We see a lot of applications. Please do not be shy. Come to us. The information is very transparent if you take a look at this information at the website. As for some memorandum, you mean not a memorandum, but that's the digital profile draft. I'm going to tell you later about it. It is much wider than just a memorandum of FinTech Association. If we answer the question of our peculiarities, details and specifics. Indeed, we see 90% of investments to bank innovations and to fintech innovations are coming from corporates. These are corporate investments, and on one hand, it's not so bad because it gives an opportunity to talented entrepreneurs to try and test their hypotheses, their new technologies, and which is also important to quickly scale them out and monetize the value they are creating. And at the same time, there are certain disadvantages, but because we really see and we meet and face, we meet a number of small companies which offer breakthrough solutions, but they face the constraint of scaling out. And here I'd like to appeal to banks, big banks, please do not try to buy everything, starting from the team and ending with the company. Please be open for partnership. It's very important to grow, to foster the companies, to make them full-fledged players and not being just part of the general ecosystem. On the other hand, we have another problem. Very many innovation centers of big corporates, when they create something beautiful, they still face some barrier from the part of the banking society. This is a wonderful fintech, wonderful. It was done by a big bank, but we don't know whether we should cooperate with it because we should be on the safe side and so on. Well, for this innovative development of the market, we need to grow and we need to foster full-fledged fintech players. Everything is okay. We see this positive movement. Banks have become more positive towards fintech startups. But indeed, we have two big question marks, two questions which we need to solve in order to have full-fledged interaction. Speaking seriously, if you have fintech integration in your bank, there is the question of delineation of powers or responsibilities. The responsibility for the client is absolutely on the bank now. If you go for this business, you have to understand what will be the responsibility of fintech, what responsibility can it take. In this regard, so far, we have some uncertainty. Apart from that, there is a number of things, and some representatives would support me here. There are issues related to cloud solutions. Banks are also actively using these clouds, but these are internal clouds usually, and there are not so many risks or problems. But when it comes to the use of fintech cloud solutions, there is again the issue of risks and responsibilities. And to make this partnership develop actively, and by the way, I invite you all to our section on open APIs. We are going to touch upon this topic a little bit because the development of the open banking as an ideology, apart from the technology standards, should give the answer to very serious questions related to the responsibility for the result we want to bring to the client. Thanks a lot. If we, discuss and put the question mark, what Russian fintech projects are the most successful? What would bring the biggest profit and what is their success? It's the question of success criteria. You, as an investment fund, you do have your criteria, don't you? Our project is venture projects. Knows how to acquire money and how to divest and how to exit the project. As for the scale of the venture market related to venture capitals and versus the global ones, 50 billions and 14 billions is wide financial investment. It's a serious share, and still the Russian market is dozens of millions of dollars. There's a good study of Raiffeisen Bank on fintech in the Central and Eastern Europe, and there are data. There's data on Russia also. There are 10 positions of successful banks, and Tinkoff is top one with $40 million, and then Bystro Dengi on the second place, and then the big gap, then 20 and 7, and so. At the same time, Tinkoff is one of the projects, as the board chairman said, that they oriented on the bottom line, they really earn money, they're not just capitalizing. So This is first. Of course, there are Russian projects which are not so successful in acquiring funds, but they are still interesting. For instance, it is Waves in blockchain, and accounting project, accounting company, Car Money, Moneyman, well, a number of projects which are well known, but they are not so successful in raising funds. Well, it seems strange because we have some supply in funds, but we are suffering under the deficit of projects where we could invest. Maybe we do not properly look for them. There is a problem. And what stops you from investing and during investing? Look, what are the specifics? What is the specifics of fintech projects? They are very bad scalable. It depends on regulatory issues, and very often they come to the dead end of getting banking license at some point. This is one. If the project is willing to develop globally, to become an international company, they face the foreign regulation, and it's become a big problem. If an e-commerce project, it can be scaled out very fast, but fintech cannot do this. This is specific.
But actually, this doesn't stop us. We are prepared to invest. We prepared to invest in Russian and European projects. Okay, so which projects are of interest to banks from the standpoint of investments? Well, actually, bankers are very unique investors. We're very conservative. Inside our heads, we have this. When we're saying that we want to become a full-fledged investor, it means that we need to change at least half of our brain. For example, from the regulatory standpoint, we have federal law that we need to comply with. But actually, we're talking about separate divisions. And digital bank and other banks, they have different rules. And there's a conservative bank. And this conservative bank has completely different set of rules. When we invest, we need to understand. And scalability. We need to understand what's happening here, but we want it right here, right now. Of course, there's 1 year payback period, but when we present something to our shareholder, he wants to know when he's going to get his money back. So, what's going to work in 1 year? Any proof? Will it cut my costs? So these are the questions. Will this technology help me cut costs or not? So this change of a mindset of our bankers and short-term strategic planning, it narrows everything. And the proper path, the right path, is to give it a try. Try working with fintechs without investments. But let's say in 6 months, in 9 months, in 12 months, we need to see the streams that we've been planning to see. It's not like 1 week and you see a deviation. In Agile, you can call it funny, but weekly approaches, I think that's the right path. And we're happy to see fintechs, but when it's inside or gets down to our procedures, and it's closer to home. I mean, there are a lot of issues inside the banks, and we need to change a lot. We don't have questions to fintechs. We have plenty of offers and proposals, but regulation of fintechs, well, initial regulation matters. What do you think about cloud technology and other things? We need to have a checklist, and we need to agree. Sorry to interrupt you, but there's a great solution for the banks. biometrics, investments in venture funds, not direct investments. And it's a great solution. I agree. I support. Yeah. So we can see how FinTech is expanding and developing in Russia. Apps, plenty of new technologies. You can pay using QR codes, and biometrics is widely used. But the market is still very small as compared to Western market. Why, and what can change the situation? Dmitry? I want to say a few words about something else first. Well, we are not that boring investor, not the kind of investor that you've just described. As for results and other things, yes, we have requirements and we try to stick to them. However, we have our projects and our investment ideology is a little different. We have traditional investments, private equity of venture nature, but I'm talking about strategic investments. And our horizons are a little different because we're not after selling something, but we want to build a new perimeter for the group of services, for the group of companies where banking services will be provided. At the same time, we have two agendas, beyond banking and internal restructuring agenda. If the world outside is going to develop, but the core banking, and I'm talking about not only technology, but the whole system, if it's not ready, then there will be disconnection. And the logic is going to be very different. It might be really interesting, but that's not what we're after. So we have our own in-house agenda, and certain things are developing in parallel. Mobile banking, for example. But it has its own life. We know each other and we are in contact. But beyond banking digital agenda, it's a little different. Another comment, partnership investments and logic. Today we see three levels. Number one is core components of the ecosystem, and we might be all alone there, building everything from scratch. Or maybe we will have a big leader in the industry, our partner. Number two, specialized unique solutions. We're prepared for co-investments, and we want to increase our share in the future, not necessarily up to 100%. But what you've just said, we don't want to go there. We want to work with the open market, and we want to grant open access to all the players. So this ideology is a priority for us. Speaking about banking products, it's not only about VTB loans, for example. We want our clients to have access to a whole range of services, banking or not. What we need to do is we need to structure this, orchestrate it, make sure that all the players find each other on really good terms and conditions. So these are the comments. This is our approach. But once again, for the bank, in this sense, when it becomes part of the strategic agenda, it's a little different as compared to, for example, portfolio investors, because the distance is shorter. Okay, thank you, Dmitry. Now let's talk about the future of the market and how do you see this market in a year, 2, 3? What's going to happen to financial technology, and will the market change, and how? Tatyana? Speaking about numbers and figures, experts say, but I don't believe them, but 40% of financial services will be consumed or based on financial technologies. 40% of banking's financial services, 40% of financial services. So this will be based on financial technology, but I think it's going to be much more. But it all depends on internet and many other things, using smartphones, so on and so forth. So these are the prerequisites that are appearing here and there, and this is the minimum that we need. What technologies are going to develop? Take the 5-year horizon, for example, not 20 years horizon. But today, banks are mostly interested in digital profile, and that's understandable, because the first step was the possibility to enter the digital world, biometrics and remote identification. So that's the entrance to the digital world. Step number 2, digital profile. Why? Because in digital world we leave a lot of footprints. I'm talking about data. We want to use this data, but we want to use them and we want to be able to manage it. So clients matter and all of this matters, so we can't do without it. So that's the project that is very interesting. And at the moment, we are getting ready for an experiment. Insurance companies and banks will take part in this experiment. The first 2 processes, there will be loan request and ASAGO insurance. If client agrees, then all the parties would get relevant information. Of course, payments will keep developing, because payments are becoming part of our life, and several steps have already been made. I'm talking about transfers of money, payments for services and goods, and transfers between individuals and legal entities and vice versa. And as for open API, I think this may change the competitive environment and the landscape in general. The whole competition is vertical, has a vertical structure, and big players can afford this. But looking at the market in general, every player can become better, and in terms of resources and competencies and products, and be more efficient from the standpoint of many other things. But open banking implementation, I don't think we need to be afraid of this, because there'll be new business models. Average banks would be able to focus on key competencies, and it can be products, working with products, personalization, working with information and data, and they may use different licenses of other banks, and we've seen a number of projects like that. Or vice versa, they can focus on efficiency, working with different companies who specialize in risk assessment, and maybe they could find new players. So open API will change quite a lot on the market, seems to me. But as for technologies, artificial intelligence and robotization, for me, there's a second level technologies. They may be applied, may be used for the purpose of efficiency, but maybe somewhere else and maybe later. Financial technologies are transforming the market, and they're changing players on the market. And if you take a look at the market 10 years ago, we had brokers who were talking directly to clients. You were supposed to have Quick or other software, but new financial technologies appeared. Big banks have occupied the market, and we now see individual accounts, and in top 5 there are no classical brokers. I mean, yes, they are brokers, but they're very different from the participants and players of the market that we saw 10 years ago. So what else will change because of the banks using FinTech so actively? Dmitry? I think that all the markets will change. So it's all about banks. Well, I think that banks are going to focus on non-banking services. The banking technology, it's quite simple. And banking products, there's nothing new here. There are estimates and there are transactions, but they may retire from banking business. But I think key here is risk management and transformations, loans, and I think these competences will stay. But it's a different kind of banking. And the whole environment, the whole relationship between individuals and legal entities, this will change completely. And I truly believe that banking products will be embedded in our lives. It will be taken for granted, not for free, though. You said 40%. Well, I think for legal entities it may be 100%, faster than you think. I'm not talking about more conservative companies, but for small business and maybe for some other companies. But I think it might be 50+. As for sales, for us, it's 50% plus sales in the next couple of years. So this will happen through digital interaction.
I believe we are not at the threshold, but we are already inside the huge transformation of the industry, which gives place for banks, but that's going to be different banks from what we have today. Thanks, Tatyana. I would agree that we are already in the hybrid world when non-banking and banking services are interacting and somewhere already seamlessly. We will see that banking products will be provided where they are needed by clients. No one would come for the car credit to a branch. For 98% of cars are bought in the dealer's office and with credits already. We already see it in mortgage. The deal is already closed on the premises of the developer. This is their requirement at the point of sale. They do it. I tell you a story which happened this year. Biggest clients of VTB peak organization, they came and said that we know everything about the risks of those who are granting mortgage. We know that 30% installment, in principle, your scoring system is not necessary because defaults are very rare there when we have to do with a 30% installment. So our transaction is just delivering money for our flat. It was for the first time because we thought that this anchor business will stay with us. But there is already a layer of business crediting where clients feel fine, they are being serviced, and of course we convinced them that this is just the first approach. There's no risk. Of course, statistics told us that if the down payment is 35%, defaults are very rare. But indeed, the scoring model, which works long, is just a confirmation, but there's not no cut-off of clients with 35% down payment. The second trend was evident in RTS, 30% of state contracts. They also told us that we know everything about clients. The client has given us all the information in the digital format, and everything has already been digitalized for a long time. They provide their balances, statements, licenses and permits. It's all in digital. They use the digital signature. They don't go anywhere with papers, and all corporations told us that guarantee, it means a transaction. there's no risk, and so please provide SLA transaction in 5 minutes, approval, and then underwriting, and they go to all banks. This is a change, and well, we have a risk model. There are products without risk, and also third parties, not only banks, and also other market players understand it and can see it. But the fact that we want to build it there where it is convenient for the client, well, indeed, we build the currency control. We have to join it there, but we still invite them to our banks and built in where we need for client seamlessly. This is the task for the banking community, how to make it invisible, to make their payments sold abroad. Yes, they want to buy something in China, but we have SWIFT. They don't understand how it works. They want quickly buy something in China. They made an invoice, well, and they go for individuals, and that's wrong, because still they are legal entities, and we should move to this direction with the seamless interaction with all industries, with all areas. Mikhail, what is the future of FinTech on your account? It's going to be a bright future, I'm sure. I think, and I absolutely agree with the statement that banks will survive, but they will be different. It's hard to dispute this statement, I think. Well, and I reckon fintechs would go further towards customization, and this statement is also indisputable right now from the point of view of industries, which will be accepting fintech. It's wealth management in all its parameters. Not quite a traditional banking service, because the supply is not big. You mean fintech in the area of wealth management, right? Yes, absolutely right. It's going to be a hybrid of human and robots. Wealth management is a more comprehensive notion other than just investment or growing your capital. That is first. Second, I think adjacent industries will be developing, like real estate and finance. It will also be quite promising. In terms of technologies, I don't want to express platitudes here, but the interaction with the humans, it's going to be artificial intelligence and robotics. And blockchain, I wouldn't forget too. There's no hype anymore, but very many people are involved, and they still continue this story, and this story would fly sooner or later. Other important points from the point of view of the global FinTech and its development, which were not voiced here, unfortunately. It is about inclusivity. The global FinTech is about inclusivity. 2.5 billion population in the world are not banked, are not covered with banking services. I know the figure, surprisingly enough, for the States, 25% of population are unbanked in the States. It's the estimate for Europe is around 40%. Eastern Europe, people who are not able to open accounts. Yes, that's true. They either open but don't get services they would like to get. It refers both individuals and entrepreneurs. And the second global topic, and was discussed indirectly, is social responsibility and social influence of FinTech, also in the area of inclusivity. You touched upon the topic of personal data. This topic is in active discussion, and we see a big confusion there. Big data or a big amount of personal data, these are absolutely different things. There's nothing illegal in using big data, but in the majority of civilized countries, personal data are well protected, and how to use them for marketing, it's a big question mark. In China, they don't care, they don't have such problem. For them, it's not a problem at all. Thanks, Mikhail and Pavel. I believe from the point of view of trends and changes, the key banking advantage is the lead banking license. It could be a warranty that especially this organization is able to provide financial services and others don't. This benefit will be removed as a stop factor. As Oleg Tinkov proved us, now it can be bought. When he bought banking service and made a startup. Initially, it was a startup, and maybe now it's still partially a startup. This part and the leveling out banking license from the point of view of simplification of regulatory activities and everything what happens in FinTech, it's going to be one point. The second point is that all banking services will migrate to non-banking areas, like payments in China. Now they completely went to WeChat. They don't know Samsung Pay, don't know anything except WeChat. They pay from this messenger just because it's convenient, and it is really so. Like now at VTB stand, I saw E-Wing logo, or was it at your stand? Was it right? Yeah, but these are absolutely different thing: digital TV and banking. Sberbank, which goes to Netflix and sees how Netflix works with data, and they buy Rambler here, and they buy digital cinemas, as far as I know, and they understand that banking and banking license does not matter. Elvira Nabiulina told us today that the central bank considers an opportunity to introduce digital currency, and of course they also consider deposits at the level of the central bank, and it immediately leads us to the leveling out of the banking license as the limiting factor. They will lose this advantage of cheap, affordable money, which can be at your disposal, taking into account your risk and marginal policy, and provide to credits. It's going to go, and it then come to startups somewhere. In terms of risk sharing or risk delineation, if there's a question of risk sharing, then there will be a question of sharing incomes. When a startup gets 3% from 3% of income conditionally, it is very difficult to take any risks. It cannot compensate it by the income from these transactions. So risks are with banks now, because they get the rest of 97% of income. If banks are ready to move in this direction, risk can be moved also. And if startups could, and I think they will be able to provide banking services completely on their own, here they will be able to share these risks too. This is the issue of capital availability, and I hope the capital will be more available in the nearest future for both startups and others, and every money man will not be, a new money man will not be so pressing and hard as it has to be now. This is my opinion. And again, migration of the whole ecosystem and the merger of different services, messengers, digital TV, mortgage, small and medium enterprises. This is a big pain now. An attempt to get credit for SME in a different bank immediately places a problem of proving your crystal clear reporting, and you have to bring a lot of permits, and you have to confirm your balance. But it should go. It should be done by one button through your digital account, not as an individual, but as a legal entity. And I hope FinTech Association will help sort this out. This trend is now simplification of everything. I do not believe in 40% in 2035. It's going to be 100% of all banking services, and banks will not be mentioned at all. Sberbank will be an absolutely different company, which will provide absolutely different services. I'm sorry, still banks will not disappear. The banking competencies, banking competence, the key competence will not disappear, will not go away. Core banking will not go away. Well, it will look differently, different columns, different terminals, but banking competence will not disappear, it will stay. The central bank will change only. When PIK wants to take the risk, it's good to consider now when we forgot about the crisis a little bit. But I'm sorry, when we have in another round and there will be a question of capital, well, it's very good to discuss it in a quiet place, in a good country, under the sun, and you don't think about warm clothing. Okay, we are already in the future now. We live in the future because we are now able to pay by your fingerprint or your by your retina. Will it be? Thanks a lot to all the participants of the discussion and good luck to you. Thank you.